Good evening, everybody. It is Family Month at River City Church, and my goal through the month of April is to strengthen your family. I don't know if you know it or not, but the family unit is God's idea, and He designed you and He designed me to operate within a family with mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and uncles and aunts and cousins. God designed all of this. Therefore, the enemy, he hates it. And he hates the family. And I hate to tell you, he hates your family. And his goal is to destroy your family. So this month, we are declaring war on the enemy, and we're declaring war on his attack against our family. And we declare to the enemy today, hands off our families. You are here today, and you were at the Thriving Marriage class, and it was my desire, and I was very, very excited to be with you in person for this class. But several weeks ago, I got invited to a pastor's cohort, and it's a year-long cohort, and it starts this week in LA, and it's for pastors that are pastoring churches around 500. And so when I looked at the material, I thought, this is invaluable for our church. I've got to get this training. And so I am in LA, so I'm coming to you via video today, and I'm excited about what God has for your life. I'm here in our Galt church, the Galt campus, and I believe that God's going to speak to you tonight. Sunday, I got spiritual on you, and today, Tuesday night, I'm going to get very practical on you. This is going to be super, super practical. As a matter of fact, at times, it may be uncomfortable practical for you, and you may squirm a little bit. Try not to elbow your spouse there. If I look at my time expenditure as a pastor, there are two things that by far take the most of my time. Number one and number two. Number one is sermon prep. Sermon prep takes quite a bit of time. Number two, right in there under sermon prep is helping people deal with family issues, especially marriage issues. And so a lot of my time has been allotted to this. Why? Because marriage is stinking hard. I mean, let's be honest, marriage can be hard. There's the natural part of it being hard, but then there's also the fact that the enemy, he's attacking your marriage. So marriage is hard. You have two totally different people, raised in different backgrounds, think differently, spend their money differently, deal with kids differently, and they're combining it all into one, and they're working together and living together and close together. And so it can be hard, but it's also one of the most rewarding, fulfilling parts of life. Having a very close, healthy marriage is invaluable. And some of you, you got saved after you were married. And when you got saved, the Lord instantly saved your soul. But then your marriage is a work in process. And that's how some of you walk into this class today. You're progressing through some issues in your marriage. And some have a lot of damage that has been done that needs to be repaired. And I want to give you this good news today. It is not too late for your marriage. Turn to a few people at your table today and tell them, it is not too late for your marriage. Whether you have been married 30 years or 30 days, whether this is your first marriage or your fifth marriage, God wants to be involved in your marriage. And He wants your marriage to be vibrant. He wants your marriage to be healthy, and He wants to be at the center of your marriage. So, enough of the spiritual stuff. That was my spiritual stuff. Now we're going to get super practical, okay? Very, very practical. The things that I'm going to talk to you about today, they're all Bible-based principles, but I'm more pulling them out of my own life, my own experience, my own marriage. By the way, I did pass these notes by Shauna, so she knows what we're talking about. And so I'm pulling it from my own marriage, and I'm pulling it from probably hundreds of people that I've done marriage counseling with in a lot of situations I found myself in marriage. So I'm calling these the rules of marriage, and we're going to go through them. Matter of fact, on your outline it says 15 rules of marriage, but you'll notice there's only 14 because when you get to your small group time, you are going to contribute number 15 to your group because this is not at all an all-inclusive list. This is really the beginning of a list of things that are important and rules for marriage, okay? Grab your outline, grab a pen, and I'm going to work through the 14 I have, and then we'll break to small groups. So rule number one right here, this is important. Marry the right person. Marry the right person. This is the starting point to making sure you have a healthy marriage. And so this is the question you'll get from a lot of people, especially young people in their 20s, and they're thinking about marriage, and they'll ask this question. Maybe you asked it at some point. Maybe you're here today asking it. Is there one right person for me? That God has that person for me, and I've got to find them. Or there are a lot of different people that I can marry that I could make it work with any of those people. If there's one person, that's a lot of pressure to find that person. If there's many people, then how do I navigate all of that? I think the answer is pretty simple. Before you are married, so if you're talking to somebody, if I'm talking to you today and you're not married yet, there are many people you can marry and probably have a good marriage. If you marry someone that's godly and has like values and you get along, you could probably marry that person. So there's not just this one person that you have to marry out there. So if you're not married yet, I'd take some pressure off of you, and I would say you're seeking after the Lord, you'll find that right person. After you are married, the majority of you here today, after you are married, you better understand that there was only one person for you. So make sure that everybody knows, make sure your wife knows, guys, that she's the only one for you. So once you're married, you've got to believe that was the right person for me. I married the right person. Now what needs to happen, that you don't need to ask yourself that question anymore. Now what you need to do is you need to work on yourself to be the best spouse possible. This is important because sometimes when you get into difficult moments in your marriage, sticky moments, don't start dreaming of other options you could have taken. Don't start dreaming of all the girlfriends. Oh, it would have been, the grass would have been greener, or what could have been different. When you are married, you are all in. All in. Don't worry about them being the right one. Worry about you being the right one. Follow me. I want you to get that right there. Don't worry about, was this person the right one? But you need to start asking yourself, am I becoming the right one for them? So marry the right person. If you're married here today, listen to me, you are married to the right person. There's no other options. All right? Number 2 rule. Marriage takes, on your notes, 2 people 100% in. It takes 2 people at 100% in. It is really the first question I ask most people when I sit with them for marriage counseling. I will ask them the first appointment, do you love your spouse, and do you want this to work? Think about those questions for a second. Do you love your spouse, and do you want this to work? What I'm getting here is I'm gauging if the hearts of the spouses are towards each other. Are they towards each other or away from each other? Because I've only had a few times that people have said, no, I don't love them anymore and I don't want this to work. It happens. But I'm gauging, are people's hearts towards each other? See, if both people don't have their hearts towards each other, love each other, and want this to work, then the marriage is probably doomed. If you are sitting here today, 100% in on your marriage, and your spouse is 90% in, you've probably got a major issue. And some of you deal with, you've dealt with a divorce and you deal with some shame from that divorce. You don't need to deal with shame, because if your spouse wasn't 100% there was really nothing that you could do. You can only do what you can do, and that is be 100% yourself. So marriage takes 2 people 100% in. So keep your heart toward your spouse. Don't let your heart start to drift towards them. Keep your heart towards your spouse. Don't let your heart harden and go in different directions. Keep your heart toward your spouse, because a good, healthy marriage, I've seen it over and over again, it really takes 2 people 100% in. So number 1, marry the right person. Number 2, marriage takes 2 people 100% in. Number 3 on your outline, give up. Oh, this is a good one. Give up on the battle to make your significant other just like you. Think about that. Some of you, you're in that battle right now. You're trying to make your spouse like you. You think that they should be like you. I've tried this with Shauna and it just has not worked out for me. Many of the problems that you have is because your spouse is different. Think about it. Many of the problems that you've had in your marriage is because your spouse is different. They think different. They act different. They have different way they do things, maybe different values. What you need to do is embrace the differences. Don't try to change the spouse. Embrace the differences that you have. Because I've got news for you. If you were to succeed and you were to make them just like you wouldn't like them very much. You wouldn't. God brought two different people together. There is beauty in your differences, and you need to start embracing who your spouse is. Shauna and I have a lot of differences in our lives, and as we've in the way we act and the way we operate in life, and as we've moved through marriage, I've learned to appreciate those things more and more. I see the big picture. Shauna sees all the details. So together, it used to be, I want her to see the big picture. She sees details. So together, we get it done well. I am cheap. I'm a very cheap. I hate spending money. Shauna, on the other hand, she loves getting the Amazon package delivered to her. It makes her day when the Amazon driver comes. So what has happened? We have balanced each other out, and we save and we spend. We save for our future and we enjoy money. I don't like clutter. I like zero clutter around me. Shauna likes a lot of decorations in the house. So we're different, but we've balanced ourselves because I see now that our house would not be warm without the touch of my wife. See how things balance each other out. You need to appreciate the differences between you and your wife and quit trying to battle your husband or your wife, and quit trying to battle to make them like you. The fourth thing, recognize the seasons of marriage. You will have different seasons in your marriage. You'll have seasons where you love, and you'll have seasons where you fight. I'm really blessed. Shauna and I just naturally kind of have always gotten along. So we haven't had some of the battles that other marriages have had, but we have had our moments and we have had our seasons. And there's been times, being honest with you, remember, a little uncomfortable, and we're gonna get really, really practical. There have been times that we'll start bickering and we just can't stop bickering. We just don't get along. It's like bicker, and we just don't know how to stop. And it's always Shauna's fault when this happens, okay? Always her fault. So if she's in here, just look at her right now and point and tell her it's her fault. So there'll be times that we bicker. There'll be times that we don't get along. And it's hard to stop it. As we've gotten more mature, we've been married now for over 20 years, we've begun to realize that that's okay, because there's seasons in our marriage. And there are seasons that we might bicker a little bit, and it's okay for us to be in those seasons. And we've come to realize that recognizing those seasons helps us solve the problem. That's what I want you to get out of this point. Recognizing the season of your marriage will help you to solve some of your problems. Never anymore. Maybe when I was first married, if we were bickering a lot, I would be like, oh man, what's going to happen here? Like, I got some insecurity and some uncertainty. That doesn't happen anymore. We can bicker for days, and there's zero insecurity in my marriage, and there's no oh, what's going to happen to our marriage? Is this not going to work out? Is she going to leave me? That doesn't happen at all in our marriage. The D word, divorce, never comes up, because there's a security in our marriage, and in that security we can recognize the seasons that we are in, and we can look at those times and we could be bickering. We could be like, okay, this is just a season and it's going to last a few days, and then we'll go back to a loving season. And that takes us to point number 5. Write it down there on your notes. Know how to fight. You need to know how to fight. If you're going to have a successful marriage, you will fight. The absence of fighting is not a reality. You will fight. You will disagree. You will have some battles, and it's not always a bad thing. It's a bad thing how you may walk through it. But the battle with your spouse is not a bad thing. It's kind of the dance of marriage that you're dealing with things and you're walking through things as iron sharpens iron, right? That happens in a marriage all the time. But I think there's some things you got to understand to help you to know how to fight. And that's this. There are levels of fights. If you can recognize this, it's going to help you a lot. So I'm going to give you 3 levels of fight. You can write it down on your notes there, okay? Level 1 fight, a level 1 fight. These are fights you'll get into, and then you will realize that if you stop fighting, you're not even going to remember what the fight was about the next day. It had no real value. And if you were to just move on and just like shut your mouth and move on, the next day you'll be like, oh yeah, we were fighting. They're like nothing burger fights. Level 1, if you just stop, it'll go away. Level 2. Something as stupid is done. This is a level 2 fight. Something stupid is done or said, and it needs an apology if you're just going to move on. Now, let me tell you what. If you're having a level 1 fight, which is a nothing burger fight over something you wouldn't even remember 2 hours from now, if you're having that fight and you keep fighting, you're going to end up in level 2. You're going to end up in a situation that you say something stupid, and then you've got a bigger fight on your hand, and you will be at a level 2 fight. Now, how do you exit a level 2 fight? You apologize. I've got news for you. Apologies are free. I apologize often. I'm always like, have I done anything wrong? Did I say something stupid? And I apologize, not just with my spouse, but I'm a person that will apologize to my children. We'll be talking about that next week. So you got to know how to fight. Level 1 fight. If it's a level 2 fight and there was something stupid done or said, you got to deal with it with an apology. Then there's the level 3 fight, okay? Some of you might be in one of these level 3 right now in your marriage, and it's when you have a problem that's got to be worked through. So you're fighting about it, it keeps resurfacing. It's going to have to be worked through. You're not just going to be able to be like, oh, we'll forget about it tomorrow. There's an actual problem. And in these situations, you need to put on the brakes and you need to decide the best thing to do, the best path, the best way for you to work through that problem. You're going to have to detach yourself from the emotion. Men out there, sometimes you're going to have to take the lead on these things. You're going to have to say, okay, how am I? Because sometimes you can become the biggest problem because you keep going at your wife. How can I actually solve this problem? Sometimes you might need to wait a few days. You might get some counseling, get some people to help you through that. And you need to evaluate you and the problem and not just your spouse, because sometimes it's all the spouse. You've got to evaluate you, and you've got to ask how you will solve that problem. So level 1, level 2, level 3 fights. You've got to know how to fight, because you will fight in marriage. You just need to know how. My wife and I, Sean and I, we don't fight a whole lot. A lot of times we'll start bickering, be like, we'll just say it, like say it out loud. Like we'll be like, oh, this is nothing. We're just going to stop. This is nothing. And we'll just move on. It's a level 1 fight. If I keep going, it becomes a level 2 because I end up saying something stupid. Next point there, number 6. Make sure you get to the other side of your battles. Okay, that level 3 fight now we're talking about. You're in that level 3 fight, or even the level 2 that you need to apologize. Make sure you get to the other side of that battle. Make sure there's resolution in your heart. Now, I like to talk things through. Sometimes I like to talk things to death with my wife. I just want to talk through it, want to talk through it. And Shauna's like, just let it go. I'm over it. So you gotta kind of know where each other fall on that. The key is don't let your heart grow cold towards each other on the other side of the battles. Make sure that you get to the other side and you do it quickly. Why? Because the space between the battle and reconciliation is an open door for the devil in your life and in your marriage. That space, you've had a battle and you have not reconciled, you are opening the door to the attack of the enemy on your life and your spouse's life. So you've got to make sure you get to the other side of battles and you don't just live there. Okay, number 7. Never, ever, ever complain about your spouse. What? Now, this is hitting some people hard right here. Never complain about your spouse. Tonight, as we go through the night, do not complain. Please don't complain about your spouse. Never complain about your spouse. It's one thing to talk to a counselor, talk about issues, talk about your problems to someone that's helping you work through them. It's another thing to get together with a group of friends and tear your spouse apart. But people do it all the time. calling mom and complaining about my spouse all the time. Call my mom, complain. Listen, I will never, ever talk bad about my wife, Shauna, to anyone ever. You would never hear me talk badly or negatively about my spouse or vent anything about my spouse to anyone. This is what will happen. Let's say I get in a little fight with Shauna and I call my mom and I'm whining, Mom, Shauna's just so mean. She called me this name. And then Shauna and I, we come back together and she apologizes and we move forward and we're over it. Guess what? My mom's not over it. My mom's still got to deal with it. So what I did is I brought other people into our marriage. I brought other people into our problem that aren't going to be able to move forward like I'm able to move forward. And let me tell you what, a lot of Bible studies can turn into complaint sessions about spouses. Don't fall into it. Don't go out and complain with your friends. Don't have that one person you're always complaining to your spouse about. Don't complain about your spouse. It is not healthy for you, and it's creating damage in your marriage, and it's creating damage for your spouse. Ephesians 4:29. We're gonna get a scripture in right here. We're gonna get spiritual. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but only that which is good, that is good and not corrupt, and is going to lift the person up. Okay, that's the communication you want to come out of your mouth. What is the perfect will of God? Good, acceptable, perfect will of God. Do you think it is the will of God to rip apart your spouse? I'm being silent for a second so you can answer the question out loud. Do you think it is the will of God to tear apart your spouse to other people? Never complain about your spouse. Number 8, we're going to call this the big one. If there is one thing you do out of this entire, and all these rules, do this one. This is going to help you big time. Number 8, be nice. For the sake of all things, be nice to your spouse. This would fix like 70% of marriage problems. And all the marriage counseling that I've done, I'll sit there and I'll be like, man, if you were just nice to your spouse, we wouldn't be meeting here today. Just be nice to your spouse. You know, I realize that sometimes it's true for you. This is why it's hard to be nice to your spouse sometimes. You'll have a stressful day. You'll have a hard day at work. There's a lot going on, and you get home and you take it out on the people that are closest to you. This is what happens. I'll be at the office or whatever and dealing with stuff and counseling, whatever sermon prep, whatever problems I'm dealing with that day. And then I go home and my poor spouse gets the brunt of the stress that I felt in the office. So how do you deal with that so that doesn't happen? Let me tell you how to solve that problem. I just tell her. That's what I do. I tell her. I say, hey, I've had a stressful day. I'm going to go sit in the room for a little while. I've had a stressful day. Or if I snap, I'm like, say something to her I shouldn't say. I say, I'm sorry, I'm stressed out. I just deal with it right on the spot, and I tell her exactly what's going on. So many spouses, I'm telling you, are just not nice to each other. Try being nice to your spouse for 1 week. You're like sitting there, you're like, well, they're not nice to me. Go with the opposite spirit, and maybe you will bring some change. Number 9, be honest. There is nothing worse than when a lie gets in the middle of a marriage. When you introduce a lie in a marriage, it will grow like a cancer and it will come back to bite you. You've got to operate in 100% truth in your marriage. I tell my kids this all the time. If I catch you doing something and you tell me the truth, you're going to deal with me. If you lie to me, you might trick me, you might pull the wool over my eyes, but you're going to deal with God. When you lie to your spouse, you might kick some problems down the road, but you will deal with it and you will end up dealing with God. A lie is a poison in the midst of your marriage, and it might take you a long time to get any level of trust back. If there's even a small lie that is told in your marriage, please, 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 I beg you, keep your marriage honest. Keep it open. Do not allow any lies to be sown into your marriage. Number 10, appreciate your spouse for their strength. Appreciate your spouse for their strength. There are so many things that my wife does better than me. I remember when we first got married, I thought, okay, I'm the husband. I've got to do the finances for the house. That's my job. I've got to run the finances. So I took the finances. I brought all it in. I paid all the bills, and I'm doing all this. And all of a sudden, like, bills are late and things aren't getting paid. And then when I became a senior pastor and I'm dealing with a church budget, our budget even got worse. And I would get bills and I'd be like, this bill stresses me out, so I'm not going to pay it this week. And then we'd have a late fee, and I didn't want to spend the money on it or whatever might happen. And our finances kind of got in a mess. And my wife took them over, and we haven't had a problem since. Why? Because she's better at the home's finances than I am. She's better. See, I'm better at some things too. I'm way better. Okay, don't tell her I said this, but I'm way better at than my wife at doing laundry. Okay, I'm a way better laundry doer than my wife. The way she does laundry drives me nuts. So guess what I do? Poor Shauna. I do all the laundry. I do all the laundry in our house, and I have a system to it, and I enjoy doing it, and she lets me. Why? Because she knows I'm better at laundry. Know what your spouse is better at and appreciate their strengths. Don't be insecure because they're stronger at something. You think you should be number one in that area. Appreciate their strengths, and it'll bless you. Number 11, decide and be clear about what will be okay and not okay in your marriage, especially when you're newly married. Draw lines. Talk to each other. Be clear about what is right and not right in your marriage and what you will tolerate and not tolerate. I remember Shauna and my first fight. We're in our apartment, and it was a little one-bedroom apartment, and we got it all set, but there was a couple boxes in the hallway. It was one bedroom, so there's nowhere to put it, and I was like watching these boxes 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day. They were still there, and I thought, I'm going to work during the day. She's not at work right now. She should take care of these boxes. So I was getting more and more irritated with the stupid boxes sitting in the hallway day after day after day. Well, finally I said something. We got in our first fight, and we're standing around the table, and we're talking heated about the stupid boxes that I shouldn't have even cared about in the first place. It's my fault that we had this fight. I should have let it go, and I didn't. And we dug in, and we were fighting. And she grabbed like a piece of paper and wound it up, and she threw it at me and walked away. And I was ticked. I was mad. I thought, you threw something at me. And she said, it was a piece of paper. Get over it. And I said, listen. In our house, we don't throw things at each other when we get in a fight. Became a rule. Never has it happened since. We don't throw things at each other. I don't care if it's a paper airplane or a piece of cotton when we are fighting. It doesn't happen because I made my expectations known to my wife, and we were on the same page. Some other things, we don't call each other names when we're fighting. Why? Because I'm super sensitive and I get my feelings hurt. So don't call me a name. So we don't call each other names when we fight. It is a rule. We're clear about it. We have set it up as a rule. We don't hang up on each other on the phone. We don't walk out. We resolve things. You need to know what is right and wrong for you in your marriage, and you need to make it clear to your spouse, because it's not fair for you to have an expectation you have not told them. You have not made clear to them. Listen, I don't want you to throw anything at me, even if it's a piece of paper, but I'm not going to tell you that. You better just know, and every time you do it, we're going to get in a huge fight. There's going to be a huge problem. That is not fair to your spouse. So be clear about your expectations in your marriage. Number 12. I think this is so important. I like this one. Be close to your spouse. Be tight with your spouse. Be best friends with your spouse. Don't live separate lives. Share your life together. No one has to force me to be around my wife. I like being around my wife. We want to be together. We do everything together. We feel so blessed that we get to even work together. And so you need to be close to your spouse. And there's seasons you will have to be purposeful about that. I mean, most of the time for Shauna and I, it's very natural. We're just together. But there are times in our lives where things are busy, and we've got to be super purposeful about saying we will spend this time together. Some of you work 2 separate jobs, and you're going with kids. You're going to have to be way more purposeful than we are about what is happening in your marriage, because you don't have that natural time together. When there's space between you and your spouse, the enemy will take advantage of it. Don't let there be space between you and your spouse. You need to be tight. You need to be best friends. You shouldn't have to force. People talk about communication, and that's something we could talk about in a future marriage class, and it is super important, but you shouldn't have to force communication with your spouse. Like, I want to communicate with my spouse. I want to be in touch with my spouse, and she does me. And so we have a natural connection, and we are tight, and we are close. And I'm so thankful for that. And some of you, you need to get back where you were 20 years ago when you were dating, and you were a team, and you liked being around each other, and you clicked, and you stuck together, and some things in your life have happened and they divided you. You need to be close to your spouse. Don't let your kids divide you. Kids need to see mom and dad that they're tight and they cannot be divided. Don't let the trials of life, the storms of life, the disappointments, don't let all those things divide you. You've got to be close to your spouse. Number 13, dream together. You and your spouse should be dreaming together all the time. I was sitting with an older retired pastor not long ago. I was telling him we were going to be going to Hawaii, and he said, man, that's how we dealt with so much in ministry. We always had a trip planned. And I thought that is so true for us. And it's not even really about the trip. It's about all the dreaming that goes into the trip. I mean, we just went to Hawaii a few weeks ago, and the trip was okay, but we spent like a month planning it. And that was so enjoyable for me and Shauna to dream about that vacation. And we always have something like that we're dreaming about together. You need to dream with your wife or with your husband. When we first got married, I remember we dreamed all the time about maybe at some point we would own a house, and we would go to model homes. We'd walk through the model homes. Now, we're big, beautiful homes in Oakdale where we were living. Big, beautiful homes up on a hill, like 5 bedrooms, amazing homes. And we thought, we'll never be able to afford one of these homes. They're $189,000. We'll never be able to do that. Like, seriously, they were like that much. And it blew our mind, but we dreamed one day we'll own a home. You need to dream together. You need to walk through Home Depot and dream about the new flooring and the new door and the new, like, whatever it is for you. Dream about the plants that you're going to plant in your yard. You and your spouse, a big part of your marriage should be dreaming together. Listen, this is going to solve a lot of your problems if you'll just get a dream with your spouse. Dream of that upcoming vacation. Dream about the children that are to come. Dream with your spouse. Number 14. Okay, this one is really, really personal to me. The blanks, I want you to leave them blank until I tell you what to put in there for yourself, okay? This is how it applies to me, though. Number 14, this is with wording for my life. You will never be a better pastor than you are a husband. You'll never be a better pastor than you are a husband. There was a debate for many, many years, like, does ministry go first or marriage go first? Because ministry is the call of God. This is so important, but then there's your marriage. And my pastor, our superintendent, Brett Allen, solved it for me one day when he said this: you will never be a better pastor than you are a husband. If I want to be a great pastor, I've got to be a great husband. Okay, now you can start filling in your own stuff here as you start to think about this. If I want to be a great father, I'm never going to be a better father than I am a husband. I'm never going to be a better employee than I am a husband. I'm never going to be a better employer than I am a husband. I'm never going to be a better man of God than I am a husband. If I'm going to be a great man of God, I've really got to be a great husband. It all works together, and it all starts with the relationships that are closest to you, that God ordained and God designed, and that is your family, that is your wife, that is your husband. So 2 things, and then we're going to get to our small groups. I want to share with you the moment that I knew that our marriage, Sean and I, was serious business. We were just newly married, probably not long after the fight with her throwing that thing at me. I can't believe she did that. We were in our house, and I was asleep, and she woke up in the middle of the night, and she saw a demon. This is the only time this has ever happened to her. And it was sitting over our bed looking at the clock. It was just sitting there watching the clock. And it scared her for a minute. She rebuked it, and it went away. And the thought came to her mind: he's waiting for us to wake up so he can start attacking us. Friends, the enemy is quick. He is ready. He's like a roaring lion, and he wants to attack your marriage. That is his agenda. Your marriage is serious business. Okay, I want to close with this. I call this my casket moment. Some of you have heard it before, and this helps me in my marriage and everything I do. So this is my casket moment, okay? One day I will end up in a casket, and I will end up hopefully in front of a church in that casket. And I need to ask myself two questions. I need to ask myself in that moment when I'm laying in that casket, who do I want there and what do I want them to say about me? Who do I want there and what do I want them to say? Of course, I want my congregation there, but that's secondary to the fact I want my wife and I want my children around my casket one day. Those are the people that are going to be that are the closest that I want there. So those are the relationships I really need to invest in. The second question I ask is, what do I want them to say? I want my wife to say, my husband was always faithful to me. I want my kids to say, my dad had integrity and invested time and he loved the Lord. Those are the things I want said. So do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make the decisions and the choices along the way to make that moment a reality. I want my wife to say he was faithful to me, therefore I will be faithful to my wife. You need to ask yourself today, and it's part of your small group questions, the last thing you'll talk about, when you think of that moment, what do you want said about you? Who do you want there? And what do you want said about you? And you need to start making choices to create that moment. Some of you say, man, but I've blown it already. Start now. Your story can start over today. So we're going to go into a small group time and we're going to discuss some of these things at your tables, and then we're going to go into a prayer time. God bless you. Can't wait to be back in Elk Grove and see you on Sunday.